Hey guys, Matt Stagliano of Stonetree Creative, and I'm here in Bethel, Maine. We're a small little village nestled in the western mountains, right in the heart of ski country, and this is where I built my home and my studio. So let's go across the street and take a look. So welcome to the building. This is certainly the funkiest building in the entire town. It's an old mechanics garage, and it was operating up until about 15 years ago. But I took it over, and we've done a little bit of renovations, but it's a really cool spot. The garage bay doors are my favorite, all the natural light. Let's go inside and take a look and see what it looks like. I've been a professional photographer for about 8 years now, since about 2013, and this wasn't a career that I ever thought I'd have. I've had a really varied background, and I've been a teacher, I've been a bouncer, a nightclub manager, a DJ, an IT technician, an HR executive, business architect. I've worked in mergers and acquisitions. I've been a consultant, a TV host, I was a videographer, and now I'm a portrait photographer. So while I've always been creative in a lot of ways, whether that's in music or writing, I never considered photography to be something that I would do. Quite frankly, it intimidated the hell out of me. I remember watching my dad as a kid. He was a hobby photographer, and he'd develop his own pictures in the basement every now and then. But as fascinated as I was with it, it wasn't something that I ever thought would be my job. So after college, I spent most of my career in the corporate world working on mergers and acquisitions. After the dot-com bubble burst in the 2010 area, I got caught up in a really large layoff. So after a year or two of consulting, I took a year off completely to just figure out the next phase of life. I was just burnt out from corporate work. And it was then that I bought my first camera. It was a Canon T3i, and I started taking photos purely as a hobby, as a way to capture moments in the outdoors here in Maine. So one of my hobbies is shooting firearms, and I would bring my camera to the range or to training classes. So during downtime in some of the classes, I would take pictures of the other students and of the trainers, and I'd post them on social media. Eventually, they started asking if they could buy the images, and companies began to see their products in the images and asked me to do commercial work for them. That blossomed into doing editorial work and photojournalism for several different magazines across the industry. And I made a living for years traveling the country, doing this type of commercial video and photo work in the niche of firearms photography. Now, that's not something I ever set out to do, but it really turned into a company, and I've never looked back. Getting laid off had a huge effect on me mentally. At the same time, I was going through a divorce and moving from Massachusetts to Maine, and so life was in a little bit of chaos. But I found that photography allowed me a different way to see the world and connect with people in a totally different way. I love just being an observer and being able to capture moments of emotion. And after a few years of doing this commercial work, I just realized it didn't bring me the satisfaction or the joy that capturing portraits of people did. So I decided to make a complete shift and focus on portraiture. In late 2017 or thereabouts, I found Sue on Creative Live, and she was doing her natural versus strobe lighting challenge with Felix Kuhns. I was interested because I wanted to learn how to shoot with strobes more so than natural light, which is what I had been doing for years. But I immediately connected with the way that Sue taught and approached her work. So I joined Sue Bryce Education shortly thereafter and opened the portrait studio in mid-2018. It was my last shot to really do anything. My business had been hemorrhaging money for years. I wasn't selling. I didn't know how to sell. I was just existing day to day. So the joining Sue Bryce Education, I wanted to finally take a step back and learn how to be a real photographer. So nowadays, I primarily shoot a mix of fine art, portraiture, personal branding, and corporate headshots, and still do some commercial content. I find that some of my best images are those in-between moments when people let their guard down and they're authentically themselves. While it's nice to have a studio, it's not critical to what I do. Ideally, I just want to provide clients with photographs that they'll love by seeing a side of themselves that they never thought that they would see. People always ask me, was there a moment in time that transformed the way that you shoot people? And for me, I was at the Portrait Masters Conference in 2018. And there was a guy on stage named Parker Pfister, and I saw him teaching on stage, talking about being playful with photography and living in a state of wonder. I knew I wanted to learn from him and how to approach photography in that way. Basically, up to that point, I had just been pretending to play photographer. I had followed all the rules. I thought I wanted to shoot glamour. I thought I had to do X, Y, and Z. And it really wasn't resonating with who I wanted to be as a photographer. So, truth be told, I was in a really, really low place at the time. I had gone through, the failure of my first business. I'd gone through a devastating relationship breakup. I was getting into all of this at the studio. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So when I met Parker at the Portrait Masters, he and I got to talking about the concept of universal translators and being able to connect story to portraiture. And that, for me, started to open up a whole new world. So I took the chance and attended his workshop in Iceland in the beginning of 2019. It was my last grasp, really, at trying to create a voice for myself as a portrait artist. And I just wanted to stop floating day by day and pretending to keep it all together. So go to Iceland, and during the workshop, I learned really what my voice was. I learned how to connect my images with story and create from all of my senses, not just my eyes. So once I was able to unlock that, I felt a major shift in my entire approach to portraiture. And I came back a changed man, a whole new outlook on what I was doing. Now, everything that I do is about connection to the person in front of me, telling a story and doing my best to bring that across. So this is my studio. I basically consider it my second home, right? I'm here all the time. The building itself is an old mechanics garage. So there's these massive garage bay doors that I can open up, and they let in amazing light all day long. But I didn't set out to find a studio like this. Basically, in this tiny little town that I have, this used to be a gift shop. And I would wander in here and get to talking to the owner, and she was looking to downsize. So she asked me, hey, what would you do with this space if you had a chance? And I said, I'd turn it into a photography studio, kind of half joking about the whole thing. And this is around the end of 2017 when I had the idea for Stonetree. And by early 2018, I was under a lease and I had half of the building while she downsized. So we just made it happen. So the universe throws something in your way, you take the opportunity and see where it goes. I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I needed to have, but I said, all right, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to Sue Bryce Education and try to figure out what I needed for the studio. When I first opened this place, I thought I needed all the things, all the lights and all the stands and all the modifiers, before I ever really knew what running a portrait business was about. I set up a retractable backdrop system and brought some secondhand canvas backdrops and was trying to emulate everything rather than learn it myself and present my authentic self to the clients. So I installed a reveal wall because that's what I was following with Sue's methods for in-person sales. I only had this one half of the building, so I was trying to do everything in about 900 to 1,000 square feet. But even in that wide open space, I made a client area, an office area, and a few different shooting locations. So fast forward a couple of years, and I now occupy the entire building. And I've separated the main shooting space from the client area and the wardrobe area and a kitchen area. So I've expanded this to about 2,000 square feet, and I spend almost all day, every day here. I absolutely love it. It's unbelievably comfortable, and I'm now super proud to bring clients in and have them experience a portrait shoot here at Stonetree. The other part of the studio that I really love is the simple smart TV that I have on the wall in the client area. I have it plugged into an Apple TV, so when it's being used, it's playing a constant slideshow of my work that you can see from the outside at night. It's really kind of cool. I also use it for all of my in-person reveals now too, using my laptop and AirPlay. And clients get to sit on the couch and go through all of the images with me on the big screen, picking their favorite. It makes the process really, really efficient. And then during shoots, it doubles as my music system, and we can blast whatever music the client loves. So that really helps with the overall mood in here. But I think the favorite thing that I have in the entire studio is a portrait of my dad that I have hanging at the front door. He's the hands down the hardest working man I've ever known and is absolutely my hero. So he was a teacher for, I think, a little over 45 years because he loved doing what he did. And being able to see him every day as soon as I walk into the studio, it inspires me to work that hard at what I love to do. For as many great things as a studio has, it does have its little bit of quirks. It's a very big, drafty, old building, right? So having a more efficient heating system would be great, but I've got what I've got, right? And winters in Maine get pretty cold, and with an old building like this, the draft comes through, so the heating bill in the winter gets to be pretty large, but it is what it is. Other than that, this place has absolutely everything I need to create the work that I love. I used to be a Canon guy for a really long time. But right now I'm shooting Fuji cameras. My main camera is the X-T4. After shooting Canon, my favorite camera was the 5D Mark III, and I was using a C100 Mark II for my cinema work. But that 5D Mark III, man, I knew that inside and out. I had been waiting for the release of the R5 and the R6, but at Portrait Masters 2019, I had the chance to test out the Fuji system, both the X-T3 and the GFX system, the GFX 50 and then 100. But I fell in love with the styling of the X-T3. And more importantly, the color science that Fuji has and how the images look coming straight out of the camera is unbelievable, and I was instantly converted. So in early 2020, I got the Fuji X-T4 as soon as it came out, and I've been shooting with it ever since. For a crop frame sensor, it outputs absolutely astounding images. And because of its small size, I have it with me everywhere that I go now. So for lenses, I mainly shoot with a 35mm prime, which is essentially a 50mm equivalent on a full frame. I may eventually switch back to Canon, but my thought right now is to stick with Fuji and then maybe move up to medium format bodies and really focus on in-studio portraiture for that. But for me, it doesn't really come down to the tool that I have in my hands. It comes down to the connection with the client and getting them to present a side of themselves that they haven't seen before. And that authenticity is really what I look for in my portraiture, not necessarily pixel peeping between different brands. To me, I have a sign hanging in the studio that what's in front of the camera is more important than the camera itself, and I believe that 100%. outside of the camera, I think there's probably a short list of must-have equipment. If I can't have a strobe with me, a reflector is a must-have. And it could be a circle reflector that you get on Amazon, it could be a V-flat. But a good portable strobe to me is always handy in any situation. So I tend to lean towards more powerful battery operated units like the Flashpoint 8600 if I want to overpower the sun, or maybe I'll use the Evolve 200 for a more lightweight kit. But in the end of the day, the thing that I keep in my bag no matter what is gaffer tape. You can do absolutely anything with a good roll of gaffer tape. For lighting, generally speaking, I'm a one light shooter. I tend to shoot moodier portraits with a little bit more contrast, and I tend to use a strobe in an Elinchrom Rotolux. It's a 39-inch deep octabox, and that's my jam. I can use that all day, every day. I'll bounce light with a V-flat for a little bit of fill, or maybe I'll use a wall, or maybe I'll use another large source like a 60-inch umbrella behind me to add a little bit of fill in the shadows. If it's not a one light setup, then it's some variation of Felix's signature light. The third lighting setup that I like to use is a Vanity Fair setup with a large light source overhead, and then I'm filling in from the side, or maybe I'm even keying from the side. But it's all about mixing those shadows and highlights. But that said, every situation, every shot is a chance to look at light differently. Being able to understand what light is doing, but more importantly, how to control it, is essential to really understanding what gear you might need. So lately I've been playing with more constant lights. I have an Aperture 300D Mark II with the Fresnel head and some barn doors that allows me to create some hard light setups. And that's been a new frontier for me, going from the soft portraiture to something much more hard edge and somewhat old Hollywood looking. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. So when it comes to retouching, I've always done all of my own retouching. I love the control over the process. I can say unequivocally that Pratik's retouching course in the Portrait Master store, along with his actions and color control panels, have fundamentally changed how I retouch. I went from knowing absolutely nothing about the art of portrait retouching to now having it be one of my favorite parts of the creative process. So while I've started to outsource some retouching just for efficiency's sake, I still love the process and do it as much as I can. For the workflow itself, during a shoot, I tether and capture in Capture One. I then move all of the images to Lightroom, where I have my primary catalog of hundreds of thousands of photos. I use a system of colors and stars and keywording for culling and organizing all the photos. And it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it makes perfect sense to me. So generally speaking, I catalog and maintain my images all in Lightroom, and then I use Photoshop to do any retouching. I'm a huge fan of frequency separation, especially on commercial work, but on portraits, it's really easy to overdo it, so you have to find a balance with frequency separation and skin. It took me a lot of time to get that technique right, but now it's an essential part of the workflow. On more creative work or images where I want to concentrate on color grading, I'll use a lot of the Infinite suite of tools like the Infinite Color Panel, Infinite Textures, Unify, Radiance, and the black and white panel really helps me achieve some looks very easily rather than spending extra time retouching the images. So I try to find the most efficient tools that will help me get the job done faster. Like I mentioned earlier, in my previous photography business, I had no idea really how to sell or to price my work. I was just throwing prices out there and hoping people would pay me for it. And they did, but I really wasn't working on any self-value, and I had no idea what professional photography really meant. So when I started the studio, I just said, well, Sue told me to stay at a national average, so that's what I started with. Previously, my average sale was right around $250 to $500, but when I started shooting portraits, I used her model and started with a $195 session fee, and then I had packages of 10 for $1,300, 15 for $1,800, and 20 for $2,200. Every image a la carte was $175, but to be honest, even if my prices were fine, I had a lot to learn about sales and specifically self-value. So now, 3 years later, I've increased my pricing several times, I've played with it, and I've been much more comfortable with all of my pricing because it actually sustains my business. My session fee now is $350. Each image starts at $275, and my packages are a little bit different. They're 8 images for $1,600, 16 images for $2,850, and 25 images for $3,800. And with that model, my average sale is right around $3,000. How I became comfortable speaking about my pricing and packages with confidence was just believing that I was worth it, that my business was worth it, and that the value for the experience that I was creating far exceeded any monetary value. So over the years, I've just become much more comfortable with my pricing, and that helps the sales process immensely. So when it comes to a price list or packaging or the marketing materials that I use, I try to be conscious about the amount of waste that I produce. So a lot of my lists and information that I give to clients are just PDFs that I send them through email, or I'll put them on my website and send them a link to it. During the consultation process, I use an iPad and I bring all of the information up on that so I can scroll through it, I can blow it up, I can really fine tune the details rather than printing it out for each and every client. I then follow up and send them all the same information in email. For vouchers, I create several different vouchers for different situations, like a complimentary session or $500 towards a session and makeup and wall art, or just $100 that they can use for additional wall art. I usually print those vouchers out through Miller's Lab, and I use the soft touch paper because it just feels this velvety, luxurious cardstock, and I love it, and the clients always tend to comment on it as well. I don't spend a ton of money on packaging like bags with logos. My clients just want to be able to transport their images home in their folio box. For wall art, I use the packaging that Graphy uses to send it to me from Italy. I figure if it makes it all the way across the Atlantic, then it'll survive the car ride home. But in all of my packaging, what I try to do is write a handwritten note, a thank you note, and include some vouchers for additional shoots or towards more products. I like to have that personal touch every step of the way, and I think a card goes a lot further than a paper bag. So I wasn't always comfortable with selling. Lord knows I wasn't comfortable with selling, but after watching Sue's videos over and over and over, repeating the scripts and learning when to talk and when to just shut up and listen, I became much more comfortable with it. To me, selling is way easier when you spend your time trying to serve your client and provide the most amazing experience possible. Rarely is it what I say that makes the sale. The incredible experience and the way that the person feels is what sells the images. As I mentioned, I don't print much in the way of brochures or pamphlets. I try to reduce waste as much as possible. I'm very comfortable using technology and tend to send a lot of information electronically. I've even slowed down on using business cards, and I just text people my contact information. In the studio, I have all of my display samples within an arm's reach and try to have them displayed like you might have them in your home. In addition to the images on the walls, I primarily use Graphy Studios for my products. I have a small set of their Pro Canvas, Pro Acrylic, and Pro Metal materials so clients can compare side by holding and touching and really feeling the different materials. I also printed my entire portfolio in one of their incredible storybooks with Sequoia leather and Amalfi paper. It's all this handmade paper. The album's unlike anything else out there, and it's truly a work of art. I'm really proud to have it in the studio. So despite how much I talk, networking doesn't really come naturally to me. I have no issue speaking to anyone about anything, but I'm kind of an introvert in real life, so driving to a networking meeting or a networking event has never been my strong suit. Especially as remote as I am out here, the typical networking meetings that people think about are few and far between. But when I'm in a situation where it makes sense to network, I do the same thing that I do in my consultations. I listen more than I speak, and people love to talk about themselves. So by listening more, I can usually find a way to discuss my own work and how it might serve that person. If you pay attention, networking can pretty much happen anywhere, so just always be ready. So I've been into building websites since the late 90s, so I decided that I was going to build my own for this business. It's a WordPress website, and I use a mix of a base theme, and then I supplement a lot of it using Elementor and building new pages with that. It's constantly a work in progress. It's never perfect, but the website really is the one central hub that you can have for your business. So social media platforms are going to come and go, and there'll always be something new, but there's no denying the power of that central hub for your business and being able to control your own messaging. So couple that with good SEO, and it can do wonders for connecting you with your prospective clients. At the moment, most of my traffic and leads come through social media, be it Facebook or more likely Instagram. Local word of mouth is also a big source of clients for me. I do run Google ads and some Facebook ads, but I still really haven't perfected that process. And quite frankly, with inquiries coming from the free sources, I try not to pay for things when I don't have to. I use 17 Hats as a studio software, and that allows me to collect the qualified leads and keep them organized. But usually the way I advertise, I'm always trying to drive people to the website. Then I use Google Analytics to track where they originate, and that gives me a lot of statistics as to where I can shore up my efforts and add some more advertising or target clients in a different way. When it comes to trade shows or sales events or different get-togethers, there's not a whole lot that I go to, but I never miss an opportunity to go to the Portrait Masters. Occasionally, I'll attend a local photography show, but with face-to-face events shifting to virtual nowadays, I try to focus on networking daily through apps like Clubhouse. Just being able to interact with people with context has been a huge benefit for me. I also host some events like gallery showings here at the studio once or twice a year. I set a lot of sales goals year over year, and my running goal that I've had since I started Stonetree was to increase my average sale 20% per year. So I hope that by next year, it'll be approaching somewhere close to $4,000. It's a little bit of a stretch goal, but totally within the realm of possibilities. Owning a business comes with an inordinate amount of fear, right? Unless you're Elon Musk, most people have a little bit of fear in their business. Now, I love to stay in my comfort zone of producing images or retouching or systems or workflows, the tangible things, but I'm still not great at my own marketing, admittedly. Marketing is all about consistency and delivering a clear message about what it is that you do. I tend to want things to be absolutely perfect before sending them out, and so a lot of times nothing ever goes out. Over the years, I've gotten a little bit better about it, but marketing my own business has always been really difficult. I can tell other people what to do, but when it comes to my own stuff, I struggle with it. So I think it all comes from that typical place of feeling not good enough or some shame or imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it. But the funny part is that should motivate me to get better at it, and over time it has. While I'm not as consistent as I'd like, my message is clear and I feel like I'm attracting exactly the clients that I want. Knowing what I know now, what would I have done differently at the start of the career? I think I would have taken time to understand that building a successful business doesn't happen overnight. I had really high expectations that the moment I had a studio, I'd be successful, right? But by trying to skip the steps of mastering each part of the business and the craft of photography, I actually did myself a disservice. You have to be methodical in your approach and take the time to truly learn each facet of the business. It's essential. You don't need to buy all the things, right? Start slowly, only buy the things that help your ship go faster. If it doesn't, just get rid of it. And a lot of people ask me, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? Well, I certainly plan on doing it for the next 5 years or so. I created a 1, 5, and 10-year plan for myself and set some pretty aggressive goals. But every day that I wake up, I review that plan. I prioritize the things that need to get me one step closer to those goals. And if it doesn't, goes to the bottom of the to-do list. It's just not that important. Not only will I be running a successful studio in 5 years, but my plan is to give back to the community as much as I can through speaking and through education and just helping others start their own businesses and get better at what they do. I think that inspiration comes from everywhere, but most of the time my inspiration comes from seeing my close friends succeeding and growing their own business and producing work that's just world class. There's nothing better than when you see someone being successful doing what they truly love. Whether they're a photographer or a teacher or an accountant or a car mechanic, if you love what you do, that's inspiring as hell to me. We're not here all that long, so find something that you love and do that for as long as you're able. It might not be your career, but it will make you happy, and that happiness spreads to everybody around you. I think right now my biggest challenge in the business is creating more consistency in my bookings, because I'm in a remote area that depends heavily on tourism. Things tend to be feast or famine, and season over season, it's always different. I'm not someone that likes to have slow periods of time, so ultimately I'd like to be booked out 4 to 6 months, shooting 8 or 10 times per month. At that point, I'd feel comfortable that everything is working as it should. I'm not quite there yet, but I am getting there. And so consistency for me is what is really going to create a sustaining business. So for anyone just starting out, I'd tell them to not be afraid of failure. I think some of your greatest success will be built on a foundation of things that didn't work the first time. Don't feel like you have to have all the gear or a large studio space. Don't feel like you aren't good enough or that your location is a problem or you're in a small town and it doesn't have enough people. None of those things determine if you're going to have a successful business. The only thing that stands in your way is you and your attitude. My personal favorite saying is, what you don't change, you choose. And if you're not changing and trying and failing and growing, then you're choosing to stay exactly as you are. And I don't choose to stay that way. So I think everybody has their own favorite courses on Sue Bryce Education. And for me, I know I have my personal favorites. At the fundamental level, the 12-week startup is truly a foundational basis for everything you need to make a living as a photographer. But for me, my standout videos are the sales intensive, the marketing intensive, the men's intensive, and all of the self-value videos. Yeah, I know that's a lot, but there's like 1,000 videos on the site, and those are the ones that I'm constantly coming back to. I own almost every course offered through the Portrait Masters. They've been absolutely instrumental in developing me to be a much more well-rounded photographer. The two most important courses to me, I've mentioned them before, the lighting series by Felix Kunz and the retouching series by Pratik Naik, because they removed every bit of fear I had in the areas of lighting and retouching. I think there's also a few hidden gems in the Portrait Masters as well. There's Michelle Celentano's Family Portrait Series, which is an absolute masterclass in family posing. Richard Wood's Painterly Portraits. If you're looking for that old master's look, that very painterly look, it's a phenomenal course. And then Laura Jade's Business of Fashion Photography is astounding if you really want to learn the world of fashion and commercial photography. So each one, like I said, is a masterclass in those genres. I've never been disappointed with anything that I purchased through the Portrait Masters. You know, at the end of the day, the financial investment that you make in Sue Bryce Education pays dividends year over year over year. I don't feel like I've ever wasted a dime on my membership, and I've been a member for about 4 years now. The amount of information that you have access to, the support of one of the best online communities I've ever seen, and the fact that the SBE world continues to find new ways to grow and serve its members, it's unparalleled. So whether you choose to be an active member in the group every single day, or you just like to lurk and watch and figure out what other people are doing, you can't help but be inspired by all of the positive energy in the group. So participate and get involved and watch how quickly you succeed. If I can do it out here with access to nothing in the sticks in the Western Mountains of Maine, absolutely anybody can do it. So